Moi, Hey, Hello, 你好，欢迎收听 Dr. Nicole Academic Life 芬兰学术生活日常。我是来自台湾的 Nicole， 在这里和我聊聊天，喝咖啡，跟你分享我和瑞典先生与女儿一家三口在芬兰工作、旅行与生活的点滴。Hello， 大家好，我是 Nicole， 欢迎来到今天的节目。现在已经进入12月了，我现在窗外是雪白一片，因为这周开始下雪了。真的有一点点圣诞节的气氛。那这2周呢，我其实真的非常的忙，所以我每天其实都没有睡好。但是这一周我心情非常的兴奋，因为这一集呢是我 podcast 开播以来的第10集了。那这是一个对我来说很重要的一个里程碑，所以呢再忙再辛苦，我都还是决定要把麦克风装起来继续录这一集哦。这学期上大学部的课程的时候，我认识了一个很可爱的芬兰女生。当时呢就是我在收集一些资讯，关于芬兰的高中啊，他们的英语教学是什么样的政策，前几集有跟大家分享过，所以我就访问了我自己班上大学大一的学生，他们的经验，他们在高中的时候或是更小的时候学英语的过程。那在这段过程当中，我就认识了这个小女生，她是在芬兰的中部一个小城镇长大的，然后她的求学过程也很平凡，就是她是上一般很普通的高中，她不像其他的很多芬兰的学生，他们是上那种 IB 课程，就是全英语的高中课程，可是她英语非常的好，所以我非常的惊艳。然后呢，尤其是跟他聊天的时候，我发现他非常有批判性的思考，还有自己的想法。还有一点是，他除了母语芬兰语之外，还有英语、瑞典语这些在芬兰也会学习到的语言，他自己还自学了西班牙语跟日文。那我觉得听他在描述的时候，都会觉得好像学习变得很可爱、很有趣、很快乐。所以我今天就邀请他来上我们的节目，跟大家分享他从小是怎么样学习语言，还有他对于语言学习的一些看法。Hello, Emma. Thank you for your time and really nice to invite you to my podcast to share with my audience about your experience in English learning.
So I'm Emma Suomalainen, and I'm from Finland. I'm 19 years old, and at the moment I'm studying quantum technology at Aalto University, and I'm a first-year student in the bachelor's program.
Are you from Helsinki area, or which city are you from in Finland?
I'm originally from the Jyväskylä area, which is in central Finland, and then I've just recently moved to Helsinki.
Can you describe a little bit about your understanding of the Finnish education, which has a very great reputation internationally?
I guess it's been going down lately, but at least it used to. So just in general, like how it works. So, well, we have a sort of like preschool when we're 6, but after that we start at 7. So it's 6 years of elementary school, then 3 years of middle school or lower secondary school. And I personally went to upper secondary school, which is kind of like high school after that, which is 3 years. But there's also a possibility to go to vocational school, which is kind of like trade school.
Okay. And so when did you start learning English?
I was around 7 or 6, and at school we started when I was 9, but I had been watching media in English before that. And I believe nowadays they start even earlier because I was in a like helping around a classroom for a practice program thing, and they were already like they had English words posted up at 7 years old.
Also like
So
grade 1 in school.
yeah, we started in grade 3. But
Okay.
I like personally, my kind of English journey started with the fact that I really liked Pokemon, and I had seen a few episodes in Finnish, and then I couldn't find any more, unlike because they had it was just television, and I couldn't find any on like any other services. So my mother found them in English on YouTube, and me and my brother started watching them. My brother's 2 years younger than me, so he understood even less. Obviously, in the beginning, I didn't really get much of it, because it's just a whole lot of new words. But then with repetition, I could get some, and then like just also watching like basic children's videos about like numbers and colors and that kind of stuff. Even if I didn't understand a lot of the vocabulary, it did help with learning the sounds and listening skills and stuff like that.
So if I understand correctly, in Finland, you don't have English as a subject until maybe grade 1 or grade 3. At home, like when you watch TV, are there any TV channels for kids in English?
Right now, I'm not sure. I believe like most of the like stuff that's meant for kids, let's say under the age of like 9 and something, are all dubbed in Finnish. So it
Mm.
usually is in Finnish. But a lot of kids, of course, watch YouTube and stuff like that nowadays.
Okay. So YouTube is quite popular for kids nowadays. In
It
your
was when
time.
I was a kid, but yeah,
In your
don't know
time. Yeah.
much about, yeah.
I see. That's really cool. So you were the great fan of Pokemon, and then that's when you started listening and
Yeah.
knowing about English.
In primary school, it was like very little vocabulary at a time, and because of course when you start at like grade 3, a lot of people aren't great at reading yet, and so they just take it slow. And I also remember we had a lot of like we focused a lot on pronunciation. I had a great teacher in primary school called Eva. She always offered me extra stuff to do, and even well, I was really active in elementary school. There was this guest that we had from, I believe she was from the Philippines. One of the teachers came out and was like, okay. And like I introduced a guest, and she was like, okay, I'm going to introduce, like, the teacher was going to interpret for her. And then Eva, my teacher, just, I was 11 at the time, shouted, like, no, let Emma translate. It's fine. She
Oh,
always really believed in me, which helped.
oh, so you felt very encouraged and motivated.
Yes.
Do you remember the English classes? Were they taught in English or in Finnish?
In Finnish. Yeah. It's
Oh.
until like in middle school it was also mainly in Finnish, I believe. I'd used to like in last year of elementary school I had a teacher that would just let me read young adult novels and stuff in school, and then moving on to something written like in the 1950s was a little difficult, but it was really fun. And then in upper secondary school, everything was in English. So the teachers would speak in English most of the time. They maybe clarified some stuff or maybe gave out homework sometimes in Finnish, but mostly they just spoke English.
So
Yeah.
in the English class, it was taught in English mainly in the upper secondary school.
Yeah. I think it kind of depended on the teacher. I'm trying to remember, but it was sort of maybe 50-50. But a lot of English was used, and we had a lot of speaking exercises and writing and reading books in English. And
And how much do you use English now on the daily basis?
now, a whole lot, of course, because I study in English. All the lectures and all the homework, I submit all the homework in English as well, which was difficult at first because I'd like been studying in Finnish all my life. For a lot of the Finnish students, they went to IB, so they'd already studied physics in English, and for me, like all the terms were new.
Oh, so you didn't go to the IB program.
Yeah, no, I went to a Finnish high school. I read a lot of books in English, for example. Like that was one of the other things, like on top of watching YouTube, when I figured I was like 12 or something, and I was at a scout camp, and I figured out that on the internet you can find a lot of PDFs of books in English, and that was like a cheat code for me because I used to read a lot, and I didn't always find the books I wanted in like the libraries because I was from a really small town. But I believe
Oh,
that's the main thing that has helped me with my vocabulary.
so like ebooks in English.
Yes.
Yeah, I do notice in the libraries here, even though I could still find some English books, but it's still limited.
I used to read a lot when I was until maybe like 14, when I was a child. I read so much. And then kind of once we had to start reading a lot of novels in school, and that became like, because I often didn't like the novels that they gave us to read, and then I would be like, oh, well, I could be reading my own book, but then I should be reading the book we're reading at school, and then it kind of just dropped. And of course, I got busier as well, but I've been trying to get back into it. I've been reading a lot more this fall.
Reading is very important. Did your parents read with you when you were little? Do you remember?
Yes, they did. They did. My mother has always liked like reading. She's uh still reads a lot, and my dad does as well. So yeah.
I see. So it's sort of like a family environment, like
Yes, they've always been very helpful with whatever I was interested in. Like when I was interested in math and like the first grade, they'd teach me like stuff, and they got me these extra, homework booklets kind of that were meant for like advanced stuff, and they've been very supportive of that. And a lot of the time when we were reading, it would like my mother would let me read for her and not the other way around, so that helped as well.
how many languages do you speak?
Well, I'd say I speak three, and then I'm learning two others. So like I speak Finnish, English, and Swedish, and then I'm learning Spanish and Japanese.
And
Yeah.
then you speak three already. It sounds like so automatic, like a spontaneous answer to me. Many people are curious about this Swedish and Finnish, like it's a bilingual. I shouldn't call it bilingual, but it's like a two national language. Did you
Yes.
also learn Swedish in school?
Yes, we started learning Swedish. And that's a funny story actually, because well, we started learning Swedish in the sixth grade. So when I was around 12, I hated it. Like I didn't like it for some reason. I feel like because I'm from an area where most people like there were no Finnish Swedish people around, like nobody spoke Swedish, and a lot of people hated learning it. So I kind of just hated it too. I had already been learning Spanish. Like I didn't hate learning languages, but specifically because I was learning Swedish just at school and I didn't have an actual use for it at the time. It felt like I was just learning these word lists and then forgetting them. And when we were in ninth grade, so just before moving on to Lukio, we stopped learning Swedish during Christmas. So like we would have the whole spring with no Swedish classes, and I was like, oh, well, I might as well just like start watching Moomin in Swedish and series in Swedish to just like keep it up because I'm gonna have to learn it in Lukia as well. Then I kind of fell in love with it because at first, of course, I didn't understand much, but then the feeling you get once you're like, oh, wait, no, I get it. I get the language. I understand it. Like that was so great. And I got really excited about it.
Wow, so you are more of a self-learning person.
Yes, I really think immersion it's really important. I get that in schools it's kind of hard to, create an environment where you're only learning through immersion. You need a lot more time for that than what you have in schools. I feel like people would get so much more out of like, for example, the Finnish like in Finland, the Swedish classes if they just spent like 20 minutes a day watching some series in Swedish. And I think the main problem is at the beginning, you're not going to understand anything, and it's going to be really frustrating. And for that reason, like I feel like a lot of people quit without listening to a language you can't really learn to understand it.
Why did you learn Spanish though?
It was kind of a hobby. Me and my mom started at the same time, It was at first just Duolingo when I was like 10 or something. It's a lot easier than Japanese, for example, for me, because it shares a lot of similar vocabulary with English. So I just like nowadays I just watch series in Spanish, and
Oh.
Japanese I started because I wanted a challenge and I wanted something that had a different writing system. Yeah, but it is taking a lot longer than with Spanish, of course, because they're not related at all to like it's not related to any of the languages that I know. Well, I have a lot of like passions, like for my like Lukio secondary school, I actually moved to another city. So I moved to Tampere to go to a performative arts high school because I just like theater, and I was like, well, I even at that time I was like, I'm probably not going to pursue that professionally, but I felt like in Lukio, like it wasn't necessary to go to like a science high school or anything at that point because in Finland they still teach all the same basic stuff. It doesn't really limit like where you can apply. I have always loved math and puzzle solving as well. Well, I really like linguistics as well. And there's linguistics competitions. I was actually in one in Brazil last summer, and they kind of can like combine my love for languages and my love for math because it's the specific kind of linguistics where you have to like really analytically go through the data and then try to solve stuff. And but ultimately some of it does come down to like the job market and stuff because like I feel like if I won the lottery, I would probably go get myself a linguistics degree. And my parents were like, they've been really helpful. Like they anytime I was interested in something, they'd encourage it and they get the supplies. If I liked painting, they get me paint, and that stuff. And specifically it helps that they had some experience with like science and stuff because even if they didn't know anything about quantum mechanics, they did know enough about the world that they could teach it to like a 7-year-old. And I think something that helped as well was that I learned to read quite early. So like I started reading when I was 4, and then I was like I reading quite well. Like I'd say at 5 I was able to read books, and that helps because you can so autonomously, find information, and you don't have to wait for your, for example, parents to go and read a book and then tell you about it. I could just read books and find out about stuff. And me and my brother, like, we borrowed a lot of these non-fiction books, I'd say, but like about basically anything, like animals or Star Wars and dragons and whatever. Not it didn't always make sense, but it was still about the curiosity, to be able to find out.
So do you think English is important?
Yes, I think since it has such a status as a lingua franca, communication is always easier when you don't need an interpreter, when you share the language, and it's so much easier to learn about different cultures. For example, with my friends now, I have a lot of friends from Vietnam. And I mean, I didn't know anything about it beforehand, basically. And it's been really fun to get to know people from so many different countries. And that would be so much more difficult if we had to use like Google Translate to, interpret in the middle. Of course, in scientific communities and IT, for example, a lot of, the work is very international. So,
And do you think particularly for Finland, do you think English is important?
it kind of depends on what you do. For Finland as a nation, I think English is really important, and I feel like it's in their best interest to have Finland be as kind of international as possible. Like where I grew up, like you'd be hard pressed to find a restaurant where you can order in Finnish, for example. Like it's which is like it's very common in Helsinki or even Tampere to find a restaurant where you like order in English. It's kind of a double-edged sword, Like I mean, Finland, we desperately do need immigration for like the job market and that stuff. And even if the government thinks otherwise, but I believe like for work and for all that stuff, and also just like the more people can communicate, the less we're going to have prejudice towards other people as well. But then, of course, English taking a more kind of leading role can lead to languages like native, like for example, Finnish. Finnish is still doing really well, but there's of course other minority languages that are doing way worse. But if you think like there's different areas of where a language is used, and I feel like, for example, Finnish is in the entertainment sector, like getting used less and less because a lot of people just prefer watching American media, like movies and TV series, to Finnish series. So like that part of Finnish culture is being affected. And of course, I think a part of how Finnish culture in general works is tied to the Finnish language. Like, for example, I'm way more like polite and I talk more in English and I ask about the weather and stuff like that. And I feel like it is tied to the language. Speaking English kind of, it creates like a bit more monotony, even if, of course, English-speaking countries have a lot of differences between them as well. But I do appreciate languages and the, having difference in between there. But I feel like having Finnish as a native language and then learning English at an early age is kind of like the best case scenario.
So back to your program, the one you're studying now, the bachelor program in English. Everything is taught in English, right?
Yes, everything.
Did you chose this program specifically because it's English taught, or did you choose it just because of the topic?
It's kind of a bit of both. So one of the reasons that I chose it was because the Finnish application system works in a way where you can like I wasn't ready to choose my major yet, and then for the Finnish ones you have to make the choice in March, and then if you get into the place you have first there, like you just have to go there. But for when you're applying to the English programs, you still get to decide in like June. So that was one of the reasons. But I do feel like now that I think about it, I'm really happy that I ended up in an English program. What I said earlier as well about studying in English and learning the terms in English has been great because I like, even though I feel like I speak quite fluent English, I felt like processing information in English was a bit like more difficult for me before I started studying here. And then everything's in English, and I feel like that feeling went away in like 3 weeks. Before that, I feel like often if I had a big block of text in English, I could sometimes like, especially like scientific text, I could like read it and then realize that I had been reading it, but I hadn't been like connecting all the dots and, actually like I didn't actually understand it.
You started in September, right? So this is only the first term, first semester for the program. And the program is taught everything in English. What's your experience now? Like, how do you feel about it?
I feel like it is really good. Sometimes there are some problems with if you're learning in Finnish. Well, the lecturers are most likely native Finnish speakers because nobody's learning Finnish. Come on. For English, it's like some of the lecturers are native Finnish speakers that don't speak English as well. So you can kind of like see where they're explaining something and you feel like they know their stuff. They could explain it better in Finnish probably, but English is kind of there's a bit of a barrier there. So that's maybe the only thing when doing live learning, but obviously the lectures aren't at least for me like the main part of learning. The main part of learning is when I do stuff on my own, like doing the exercises and that.
Well, amazing, Emma. Thank you so much. You know the reason why I ask you because I think I'm just so impressed, not just because of your English skills, but also your maturity. I hope you have enjoyed the first semester, and I'm hoping, everything goes well the next few years of your university time and enjoy it. And thank you so much for sharing your experience with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for
Thank
inviting
you.
me. Thank you.
好，那我想要做一个总结哦，就是我们常常会觉得，没有足够的语言环境，比如说你可能人不在国外，或者是学英语全英语的环境里面，但是我觉得 Emma 的经验跟我自己个人的经验很像，就是语言其实是你可以自己创造那个环境的，加上现在这个社会这个时代其实是很多很多的资讯，网络也非常的发达，动机很重要，你找到一个你喜欢的主题，然后你就会有这个热情去学习。那我非常感动的是他提到他父母亲的正面的引导，然后如何引导他去阅读，让他觉得阅读可以打开了他的视野哦。那他自己也找到了一个自己喜欢学习的方式，比如说他喜欢神奇宝贝，然后呢再大一点他喜欢看鲁鲁米，他就发现他可以用这样的方式去帮助他学习任何一个语言。那我觉得这个喜欢学习的心态，这个培养是非常重要的。然后还有一点是他对语言的观念，是他觉得这是一个沟通用的一个工具，而且他也讲到了一个人跟人之间如果是可以沟通，不需要透过翻译是最直接的方式。还有就是如果人跟人可以沟通，其实可以少掉很多偏见，就是对彼此的文化跟背景能够有更多的了解。我觉得在一个19岁的孩子讲这样的话，其实让我觉得很感动，我觉得真的在他的身上我学习到非常的多。那我希望今天这一集的访谈的分享能够给大家带来一些启发跟鼓励，就是尽管你是在一个 没有英语的环境，你是可以自己创造学习语言的环境的。今天的节目就到这里，谢谢你的收听。如果你喜欢我的节目，欢迎按下小铃铛追踪订阅，也请你给我5颗星好评，更欢迎你留言给我分享你的看法。如果你对求学或是求职未来感到迷惘，或是对于学习英文、准备雅思考试有任何问题，需要学习计划，欢迎与我预约免费30分钟咨询，跟我聊聊你的现况与挑战。你可以从我的 podcast 首页下 calendar 里的连结点选表格中蓝色的日期，或是欢迎你直接私讯给我，跟我预约聊聊。我们下次见咯，拜拜。